They were trying to destroy our dollar. They were going to say, they wanted to create a new currency. They probably wanted to use the yuan, China.
Realize capitalism didn't change China. China changed capitalism.
I think that's breaking up very rapidly. We said that if they're going to go and do anything to undermine the dollar, that includes China.
A lot of time, most of the people who are up here now don't remember. I was very young, obviously, at the end of the Cold War, but it's been about 30 years. In our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around.
Right before our eyes, the global financial order is shifting in ways unimaginable just a few years ago. In a move that sent shockwaves across Wall Street, China has not only canceled major U.S. investments, but also persuaded the BRICS alliance and over 100 nations to dramatically reduce their dependence on the U.S. dollar. The response from former President Donald Trump? A thunderous warning to Beijing and its allies, signaling what could become the fiercest economic showdown in modern history. At first, the story looked like just another headline about trade disputes and currency policies, but insiders quickly revealed that this was no ordinary economic disagreement. According to Financial Times and Bloomberg, China's leadership had been quietly coordinating this bold financial strike for months, holding closed-door meetings with representatives from Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, and dozens of emerging economies. The goal was simple yet explosive: to break free from what they call Washington's dollar trap and build a multipolar financial world where the U.S. no longer holds the ultimate economic weapon. For decades, the U.S. dollar has reigned supreme as the world's reserve currency, dominating trade, finance, and energy markets. This dominance gave Washington unparalleled power, sanctioning rivals, cutting off banks, and even freezing entire nations out of the global financial system with the stroke of a pen. But now, Beijing and its partners are openly challenging that system. Trump, speaking at a rally in Texas, blasted the move as an attack on American sovereignty and warned that any nation siding with Beijing's financial rebellion could face severe consequences. According to Politico, his advisors are even discussing possible tariffs, sanctions, and diplomatic retaliation if the dollar's global dominance continues to erode. Behind the scenes, however, the situation is far more complex. Sources from Nikkei Asia reveal that Chinese officials have been crafting this strategy since Washington began weaponizing the dollar during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, freezing Russian assets and cutting Moscow off from Western banking networks. To many nations in the global south, it was a chilling reminder. If the U.S. can do this to Russia, it could do the same to anyone. That fear has now become the fuel for Beijing's campaign. From Latin America to Africa to Southeast Asia, countries are signing new trade and energy deals in local currencies, or Chinese yuan, bypassing the dollar altogether. Saudi Arabia recently completed its first oil sale to China in yuan, while Brazil and Argentina are exploring similar arrangements for agricultural exports. The dollar was once seen as neutral, explains an analyst at the Brookings Institution. Now it's viewed as a tool of American foreign policy. That perception has changed everything, and indeed, the numbers tell a dramatic story. According to the International Monetary Fund, the dollar's share of global reserves has fallen from over 70% in 2000 to less than 59% today, and the trend is accelerating. Trump's warning comes as BRICS leaders prepare to unveil plans for a new cross-border payment system and even a potential gold-backed currency. If successful, experts say, it could trigger the biggest shift in global finance since the creation of the euro. As one former U.S. Treasury official told Reuters, this isn't just about China. It's about an entire coalition of countries saying they've had enough of dollar dominance, and Washington may not be able to stop it. Behind closed doors, Beijing is celebrating what state media calls a financial turning point in world history. According to sources cited by South China Morning Post, senior Chinese officials met quietly with finance ministers from Brazil, India, Russia, South Africa, and dozens of other emerging economies to finalize plans for what insiders describe as the largest coordinated move away from the U.S. dollar in modern times. The key to this strategy is diversification. Instead of depending on Washington-controlled payment systems like SWIFT or holding vast reserves of U.S. treasuries, countries are being encouraged to settle trade in local currencies, use China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, and even explore commodity-backed settlement mechanisms. Financial experts warn this isn't just talk. Over the past 6 months, energy contracts between China and the Middle East have increasingly shifted to yuan, while African nations have begun negotiating mining deals in local currencies. Latin American exporters are following suit, bypassing dollar settlements that once dominated global trade. China has been preparing for this moment for years, says a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. They've built alternative payment systems, signed bilateral currency swaps, and created financial alliances across the global south. Now they're moving in for the kill. Trump, however, sees this as nothing short of economic warfare. During a recent interview with Fox Business, he accused China of trying to destroy the American financial system and warned that the U.S. will respond very strongly if our economic supremacy is threatened. But analysts point out that Washington's options may be limited. According to Reuters, sanctions or tariffs might only push more nations into Beijing's camp, accelerating the very trend Washington fears most, the rise of a post-dollar world. And Beijing knows this. Sources from Nikkei Asia claim that Chinese negotiators have quietly offered oil producers in the Middle East and major commodity exporters in Africa long-term infrastructure investments on one condition: pricing future trade in yuan or local currencies instead of dollars. The response has been overwhelming. Reports suggest that more than 100 nations have expressed interest in joining this new financial architecture, many of them citing fears of Washington's growing use of sanctions as a political weapon. The message from Beijing is clear, says an economist at the Carnegie Endowment. They're telling the world, you don't have to live under the shadow of the US dollar anymore. Meanwhile, Wall Street is growing nervous. Bond traders worry that if global demand for dollars and US Treasuries falls sharply, borrowing costs in America could skyrocket, potentially triggering a debt crisis. As one JP Morgan strategist told Bloomberg, if China and its partners really follow through, this could be the most significant challenge to US financial hegemony since World War II. In Washington, the mood has turned tense as the implications of China's bold move sink in. Treasury officials and Federal Reserve policymakers are quietly warning the White House that the U.S. faces a historic financial challenge if demand for dollars and treasuries continues to weaken. According to Politico, one internal report described the situation as a ticking time bomb for America's $34 trillion national debt. Trump, never one to shy away from confrontation, has doubled down on his threats. Speaking at a rally in Ohio, he declared, "If Beijing thinks they can destroy the dollar, they've got another thing coming. America will never surrender its financial supremacy." Behind closed doors, however, officials acknowledge the difficulty of the situation. The U.S. can impose tariffs or sanctions on individual countries, but punishing dozens of nations simultaneously could trigger global trade chaos. Economists warn this could backfire, hurting U.S. exports, spiking inflation, and pushing allies closer to Beijing. Meanwhile, BRICS leaders are moving full steam ahead. At a recent summit in Johannesburg, they unveiled plans to launch a new cross-border settlement system designed to rival SWIFT, as well as exploring the idea of a gold-backed reserve currency. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, called it the birth of a new financial era, while India's representatives described it as a chance to build a fairer, multipolar economic world. The reaction from financial markets has been immediate. Bond yields in the U.S. have begun creeping upward as investors worry about future demand for treasuries. The dollar index, which measures the greenback against other major currencies, recently posted its sharpest quarterly decline in years. Scott Bessent, the legendary investor who predicted the 2008 financial crisis, told CNBC that the U.S. could be approaching a once-in-a-century reckoning. If foreign central banks begin dumping treasuries en masse, he warned, the result could be a full-blown debt crisis in America. Even America's allies are hedging their bets. France has conducted its first LNG trade with China in yuan, while Saudi Arabia, the backbone of the petrodollar system, is negotiating long-term energy deals in local currencies. This isn't just a currency story anymore, says a senior economist at Brookings. It's about geopolitics, energy security, and the shifting balance of power. For ordinary Americans, the stakes are enormous. A weakened dollar could mean higher borrowing costs, soaring inflation, and declining U.S. influence abroad. For emerging economies, however, this new system offers freedom from decades of dollar dependence and a chance to escape Washington's financial grip. As one analyst in the Financial Times concluded, we are witnessing the slow-motion end of the dollar era. Whether the U.S. can adapt or whether it fights to the bitter end will shape the 21st century.